West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Good evening, everybody. We begin the readout tonight with a right-wing ghost story. Spooky in many ways. So grab your popcorn and your fascism kryptonite, because this is quite the tale. It takes place in Utah, where groups of strangers are knocking on doors, which is strange already. Random door knocking during a pandemic by people who may or may not be wearing masks. Hard pass. But that isn't even the creepiest part. The person knocking at the door is a volunteer for a group known as the Utah Voter Verification Project. And it's the latest front in the so-called Stop the Steal election fraud conspiracy movement. Now, we know this thanks to an investigative story by the Salt Lake Tribune. Kudos to local journalism, by the way, who looked into this group and their strange door-knocking ways. And this is what they found. The questioners are part of a private statewide effort to root out supposed voter fraud. Sound familiar? Like the thing that they tried in Arizona, examining ballots for Cheeto dust, only to conclude that President Biden actually won the state by an even greater margin. Unlike Arizona, Trump won Utah. But that isn't stopping the Utah door knockers from sniffing out fake fraud with their weird questions and clipboards. The Tribune got its hands on the group's training material. The questioners are trained to keep things vague. They do not wear name tags. They refuse to identify themselves or what organization they're with. They introduce themselves as people of Utah who care about our country and the integrity of our elections. They also appear to have the personal voter information of the people that they were questioning. Now, residents complained about these strangers knocking on their doors, asking questions, because, who wouldn't? But these strangers did a lot more than just ask questions. They also recorded audio and video without the consent of the person being recorded, which, by the way, is legal in Utah, but still weird. Their mission is to match voters to votes cast in the 2020 election to determine if any were fraudulent. And this is what I mean by ghost story, because they're chasing ghosts, because there is no fraud. Even the Utah governor and lieutenant governor, both Republicans, have called voter fraud claims absolute falsehoods. And it doesn't end there. The Tribune's investigation also revealed that the group has direct connections to the election conspiracy organization linked to, you guessed it, QAnon, along with an indirect connection to Mike Lindell, the TV seller of crappy, overpriced pillows and MAGA dreams. In the training manual the Tribune obtained, one of the rules includes, quote, please look and act as, quote, Team America, which sounds a lot like Lindell's new nationwide group called Cause of America. And this is where we just zoom out just a little bit. Because this is not just happening in Utah. This is happening all over the country. We are seeing voter intimidation and calls for audits in several states. This door knocking is just the latest evidence of the movement's shady practices. The Tribune reported that there are groups on Telegram working to organize this Utah style of door knocking in Florida, in Mississippi, and in Nebraska. This is a national campaign by the right to convince America that our elections are a sham. It doesn't even matter if they can't find proof. The point is to generate media coverage and investigations and affidavits to create images that generate confusion and cynicism until their death cult leader or some version of him snatches the White House again, which is why the big lie is orthodoxy for the Republican Party. This is the master plan for the rest of us. It's a lie with a body count. The scary thing? It just got bigger. Joining me now is the reporter for this story, Brian Schott, political correspondent for the Salt Lake Tribune, along with MSNBC legal analyst Maya Wiley and DNC and DCCC advisor Kurt Bardella. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Schott, congratulations on excellent reporting. A very weird and scary story that you reported. And I guess my first question is, did this come out because of complaints? Or were people, as they were getting these, sort of door knocking, did people actually complain? Did they call 911? Did they ask, who are these people?
The complaints came as I was preparing to actually write my story. I had seen posts seeking volunteers for this group on Telegram. And you mentioned that this was a ghost story. The people behind it were ghosts. It took me months to track them down. They have no online presence on any of the major social media programs. You can't find them on LinkedIn. It took me forever to even find the name of one of the people. I was able to track them down finally and was able to get a recording of one of their training sessions and their materials, but they're doing everything they can to remain hidden. And so it was very hard to get a hold of them, or at least to find out who they were. I was unable to get a hold of them. They didn't return my calls. But as I was getting ready to report this story out, I had met with our lieutenant governor, who's in charge of elections in the state, and she said, we're starting to get complaints from some parts of the state that there are people going around knocking on doors, and they appear to have the personal voter information of everyone. And so it sort of happened at the same time that these complaints started to come in. But I had been trying to find out who this group was for quite a long time, because it certainly seemed like they were trying to look for phantom votes, as they called it. But I didn't know who they were or what they were doing. And it really got my attention that they were doing everything they could to conceal themselves from mainstream online space.
And so there have been organizations like this, like True the Vote, that goes all the way back to 2012, that also tried to raise the prospect that President Obama's election was fraudulent. This pretty much happens every time a Democrat wins the White House. Let's just be honest. But it generally is not directed at a red state like Utah. Like, this is a state that Donald Trump won. So were you able to sort of get to the bottom of what is it that they want to prove? Donald Trump won the state. What are they trying to prove? That he didn't win the state, or that he won it more?
That Joe Biden did not get as many votes in the state as he did on election night. They're looking for votes that were cast by people who don't exist, or don't live at some place, or don't live at an address, or haven't lived there for a while. They're specifically asking, did you get extra ballots? Because we are a universal vote by mail state. Mm-hmm. Asking people if they got extra ballots, and then what they did with those ballots. The whole point, as I pointed out in my article, is to get affidavits. That's why they are recording you without your knowledge, so that if you don't do an affidavit, they can recreate one from the recording. They're trying to find out what happened to these extra ballots. And as I listened to this recording of the training session, the person running it absolutely claimed that she had found numerous fraudulent votes in the state. They are adherents of Seth Keshel and Dr. Frank, who are far-right election conspiracy mongers who use math to try and claim that their algorithm shows that there were irregular votes. So, and the other people on in the training 100% went along with them. They accepted that without question. That the organizers said, "I found some blatantly illegal votes the other day," and they were like, "Oh, okay." And it's kind of jaw-dropping to listen to this, because they're living in an alternate reality. And now it seems like they're trying to weaponize that.
Hey, so Maya, let's talk about this. First of all, the fact that it is legal, it's a one party, so they're not doing anything illegal. I think we should start out with that. It is creepy and it is weird. But what do you make of this sort of broad-based overall strategy, which Steve Bannon has also said that he would like to see it, to simply undermine the idea of elections being legitimate, period? Even if they get the result they want, they seem to want to just undermine the idea that elections in and of themselves are legitimate. What could be the purpose of doing something like that?
Well, it's become the greatest mobilizing tool the right has ever had, from what we can tell, including organizing to the extent that they can have people believe what is patently, obviously not true, and organize and use them to their own ends. So we've already had a Republican Party that, rather than contesting for the votes of voters, are gerrymandering, are using voter suppression tactics. In a way, this has become the popular mobilization of the undermining of true democratic process. Because the point is about this democracy is we're supposed to be trying to get people to become adherents to our policies, not adherents to our own personal power. And I think, as Barton Gellman had in his Atlanta piece, which I think Brian's story really underscores, is that this is about grassroots mobilization that has been radicalized, but it hasn't been radicalized for a democratic purpose. It's been radicalized for the particular power of Donald Trump. And if he loses re-election again, is already mobilized for essentially the next insurrection. And that's a scary, dangerous thing.
It is Wednesday, the 8th of December of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, this is the day where a lovely egg dish is covered with a velvety hollandaise sauce, and also we get rid of a bunch of meddlesome priests in the, while doing the same thing. You gotta multitask. Well, we actually have a little bit of religious reportage today, as a matter of fact. This country was supposed to, I know you're not supposed to say supposed to. Anyway, I actually thought that we were to have a separation of church and state. I actually thought that there were no religious tests in the United States of America, but apparently not anymore. And, like I said, we'll have some reportage on that coming up, so I won't go too deep in it, but I will mention something that's got me a little peeved. A judge determined that Steve Bannon asked to delay his trial until October. Prosecution wanted to start in April. Now, wait. It's December. It's the beginning of December still, in my book. April? Why the hell didn't I... Look, he's in contempt. What do you need to know? and what do you need to know any more than what you already know? Just bring what you got. Show that he's in contempt because he defied a lawful subpoena, and charge his ass. Bring him in. Jail him or whatever it's going to take. April? I'm thinking more like January. February's stretching it in my book, but April? And of course, Bannon wants it in October. Why? November elections, Well, the judge would not give Bannon what he wanted. Nope. He's not going to get almost a year. 8 months, though. He doesn't have to go to court until July. Judge tells the prosecution, oh no, April, that's a little too fast. Bullshit. We're talking about an insurrection here. We're talking about a subpoena defied haul his ass in the next week. What's the problem? Oh, the judge. Federalist Society. I would think that if the Federalist Society is so responsible for the condition of our courts, then maybe the Federalist Society and their judges need to go. If you're unqualified, and who determines who's qualified and who isn't? Well, I would think the American Bar Association is well equipped to do that. In fact, they did for a long time until the Republicans said, no, we want Federalist Society people in here because, you know, they're not liberals like the American Bar Association. Anything that's not a Nazi-oriented concern is going to be a commie liberal. So I'm a little peeved about that because now we got Mark Meadows defying a subpoena. Oh, and they're going to draw a criminal contempt charge on him as well. Well, when is he going to ask to be brought to court? October? Federalist Society judge will quibble and go, it's okay, coming in July. And the prosecution will continue to say, nah, April. April's good. January. Bring him in the middle of January. What's the problem? How about all President's Day? We can even push it into February if we need to. April? And then the judge settles on July? Yes, it's quite bothersome. Because how long has it been since the insurrection? I know they've interviewed hundreds of people. I know the FBI has their work cut out for them. But when you got a Bannon, a Steve Miller, and all the rest, they can't be brought to heel. They can continue to go on their platforms and on cable networks and mock the United States of America and its laws. And nothing untoward can happen to them. Shadow government down in Mar-a-Lago with diplomatic relations going on overseas, that's a violation of the Logan Act. I just don't get it. Of course I do. I'm just being rhetorical. Because how many tiers of justice are there? I'm not talking personally. I'm talking about the law. We know that there's a lot more of justice where justice comes from. Yes, and I know. But we're talking about the law. And how these tiers of justice are affected or effected tend to be quite, shall we say, partisan. There's a guy, I believe it was Colorado. Is that correct? Or maybe it was Pennsylvania. I got to look it up, but I'm sorry. It's just, I came across it, and it pissed me off. So I had to, I got to get away from this story. Catch my breath. Now, a guy planted some bombs in a downtown area. And the judge let him go. Oh, yeah, he was convicted of a misdemeanor. Public disturbance. The bombs did not go off, but, he meant them to. Or did he say he didn't mean them to? I don't care. But his excuse was, I was having a psychological crisis. I lost my job. My wife divorced me. My priest wouldn't talk to me. Yada, yada, yada. Well, why don't you join the military? Like in Stripes. Jeez. No, he's going to go plant some bombs. And the judge lets him go. Okay, time served. You're on probation. Don't do it again. Okay, get some help. Didn't that kind of behavior already happen and 4 high school kids are dead now? Yeah, you got to learn not to get caught, son. Well, mom and dad got caught. See what they mean? Jesus. Which, actually brings up another question, totally unrelated to the white guy. Oh, did I mention that the guy who planted the bombs was white? Well, you probably figured it out already. Because then I'm thinking about Khalif Broder at Rikers, accused of stealing a backpack that he never stole, and he sat in there and rotted for 3 years. 2.5 of it was in solitary. A kid. Black kid. Then they let him out, and they go, oh, well, you know, go out and make it in the world. And the kid killed himself. He couldn't take it. Put in ISO for 2.5 years for a crime he never committed. And here's a guy planting bombs. Oh, I was having a breakdown. Oh, okay, well, you're having a breakdown. So is it any wonder that a Meadows, a Bannon, a Stephen Miller, etc., Roger Stone, that rat effer, they get to walk and breathe the fresh air. And Khalif Broder is 6 feet under. It's enough to make someone mad. I know I am. Well, we should center ourselves and delve into the curated part of the show, because that's how we center ourselves. We must have order. Yes, well, starting off in the Bistro Cafe at the top, that shadowy Utah voter verification project that's going door to door intimidating citizens while looking for non-existent voter fraud. The whole idea is to keep people from voting, isn't it? Yes, it is. On the rest of the menu, citing reduced demand, the EPA lowered the annual production requirements for ethanol and other biofuels. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments today from parents in Maine who want to use a state tuition program to send their children to religious schools. They want the state to pay for religious education. They've been doing this since before I went to Catholic school. And Biden's Supreme Court Commission has released its final report. Expand the court? Well, we'll find out, won't we? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Thailand's Supreme Court sentenced a construction tycoon to 2.5 years in prison for poaching protected animals. Now do Junior. You know, Trump, Downey Jr. And a suspect in the 2018 killing of Saudi journalist and Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi was arrested in France. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link, across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, and become a Patreon of Netroots Radio, it helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this resistance against, really, we're not using hyperbole here when we call it the Nazi takeover of the United States of America. It certainly is fascist now, isn't it? But I think that the tactics and the obsessively married aspects of corporate interests with government, Pretty much like Nazism, isn't it? Anyway, regardless, it is totally 180 degrees opposite of what representative democracy is. And your generosity in helping us continue this powerhouse of resistance really does help us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many years ago. So truly, if you can afford to send us really the equivalent of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, it really does help. Because we got bills to pay, machinery to continue maintaining and replacing as needed, and those constant software upgrades and getting new software because they tell you to. Okay, enough of that, but this is the time of year, I know, when money is short, so when you're able, do consider us because we take what we do here quite seriously. So seriously that we are going to be celebrating our 11th year of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting in just a few months. That's how serious we take it. All right. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank him for doing so. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get it linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. And those show notes and links is where the real reportage is, without abbreviation. And, I don't know, funny, insulting accents. Yeah, without that. Anyway, you can follow me at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Spreaker for now. We'll see what's happening. Still got lots of work to do to put stuff into archive. Okay, let's tuck. Yeah, we will tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's out of the Associated Press by Matthew Daly and Brad Pitt. Are you serious? Wait a second. David Pitt. Shoo. Scaring me there a little bit. Matthew Daly and David Pitt. I don't know if he's any relation to Brad, but I don't know. The Biden administration yesterday, Tuesday, lowered annual production requirements for ethanol and other biofuels to account for reduced demand as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. At the same time, the administration moved to reject requests by small oil refineries to be exempted from ethanol requirements, saying they had failed to show exemptions were justified under the Clean Air Act. They do this every year. Taken together, the actions reflect the administration's commitment to reset and strengthen the Federal Renewable Fuel Standard, or the RFS, following, quote, years of mismanagement, end quote, by the Trump administration and disruptions to the gasoline market stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic, officials said. The actions announced yesterday, Tuesday, will enable officials, quote, to get the RFS program back in growth mode by setting ambitious levels for 2022 and by reinforcing the foundation of the program so that it's rooted in science and the law. Well, that's refreshing. Michael Reagan, administrator of the EPA, which sets ethanol requirements under the RFS. The lower production targets are a win for the oil industry, which argues that biofuel blending is costly and raises gasoline prices. Ethanol producers, including the nation's corn farmers, say the corn-based renewable fuel is better for the environment and helps meet federal climate change goals. Federal law requires refiners to blend billions of gallons of biofuels in the nation's gasoline supply, or buy credits from refineries that do the blending. Refineries can seek waivers if they can show that meeting the ethanol quotas would create a financial hardship for the companies. The ethanol industry struggled last year as gasoline usage dipped because workers stayed home instead of commuting, and vacation travel halted. As fuel sales began to return, demand for ethanol increased, pushing prices higher. In addition, Midwest farmers had a good growing year for corn, and the abundant supply moderated corn prices, lowering the input costs for ethanol producers. The combination of higher demand and lower input costs pushed ethanol profits to near record levels. While the law sets benchmarks for the ethanol industry to meet, it also allows EPA to waive the targets if it determines the program is causing severe economic or environmental harm based on inadequate domestic supply. The Energy Information Administration said gasoline used for cars and trucks fell to 8 million barrels per day last year, a 14% drop from 2019, and the lowest level of consumption since 1997. Since ethanol is blended into the nation's gasoline supply, a drop in gas use resulted in lower demand for ethanol. The 2020 target is far short of the 30 billion gallons mandated for 2020 by Congress when the ethanol law was vastly expanded nearly 15 years ago. EPA has not met the ethanol volume requirement in the 2007 law since 2013. Sherman from the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments in a challenge from parents in Maine who want to use a state tuition program to send their children to religious schools. The parents argue that their exclusion from the state program violates their religious rights under the Constitution. Teacher unions and school boards say a ruling for the parents would be a blow to public education. The case being argued today is the latest test of religious freedoms for a Supreme Court that has favored faith-based discrimination claims. In largely rural Maine, the state allows families who live in towns that don't have public schools to receive public tuition dollars to send their children to the public or private school of their choosing. The program excludes religious schools. The schools don't even have to be in Maine, or the United States for that matter, to qualify, said Michael Bendis, a lawyer for the libertarian public interest law firm Institute for Justice. But if you want to go to the Jewish day school or the Catholic parish around the block from your house, no, said Bendis, who was arguing the case on behalf of the Maine parents. Maine Attorney General Aaron Fry argued in a court filing that the issue at hand is access to public education. The parents want, quote, a different benefit, a religious education, Fry wrote. Last year, the High Court ruled 5-4 that states must give religious schools the same access to public funding that other private schools receive, preserving a Montana scholarship program that had largely benefited students at religious institutions. But even after that ruling, the First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the Maine program, holding that the state was not violating anyone's constitutional rights by refusing to allow taxpayer money to be used for religious instruction. The three-judge panel included retired Justice David Souter, who occasionally hears cases in the appeals court. The Supreme Court could use this case to resolve the extent to which religious schools may use public funding for explicitly religious activities, such as worship services and religious education courses. I want to jump in and just say, you can believe me, there won't be any money going to the Jewish day school. Not one red cent. Parents sued in federal court to be able to use state aid to send their children to Christian schools in Bangor and Waterville. The schools in question, Bangor Christian School and Temple Academy, are uncertain whether they would accept public funds, according to court filings. The Bangor school said it would not hire teachers or admit students who are transgender. Both schools said they do not hire gay or lesbian teachers, according to court records. Colleen Long of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The commission tasked by President Joe Biden with studying potential changes to the Supreme Court has released its final draft report, a cautious take on proposals from expanding the court and settling possible term limits. The 36-member bipartisan commission was not charged with making recommendations under the White House order that created it. As a result, much of the final report from the group, largely composed of academics who have been studying court reform and holding hearings, is context and history that may be used going forward in proposals to introduce changes. The panel, led by Bob Bauer, who served as White House counsel for former President Barack Obama, and Christina Rodriguez, a Yale Law School professor who served in the Office of Legal Counsel for Obama, cautioned that excessive change could potentially erode democracy further down the line. Indeed, in recent years, we have seen Democratic governments regress or backslide with respect to judicial independence, the court wrote in its report released on Monday. This has come about through electoral majorities using their power to restructure previously independent institutions, including courts, to favor the political agendas of those governments. The makeup of the Supreme Court has come into even sharper focus following a ban on abortions after 6 weeks in Texas, and arguments last week on a Mississippi case in which the 6-3 conservative-leaning court signaled a willingness either to overturn or substantially roll back abortion rights enshrined in the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision and its 1992 ruling in Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which reaffirmed Roe. A decision is not expected for months. Actually, it's in June. The commission's review was a campaign promise Biden made in response to pressure from activists and Democrats after the court's composition tilted sharply to the right during former President Donald Trump's term. He's largely avoided the topic since. Well, let's remember, the court packing began long before Trump took office. It's just that he got to steal 3 seats. On top of all the court packing up and down the judiciary. So when we're talking about the independence of the judiciary, yeah, we need to wrest control of it from the partisan divide that's been created by the extreme right wing in this country, funded by right-wing billionaires. And I got to tell you, billionaires by their very definition are stateless actors. They have no loyalty to wherever they are. They just want to make money. And they will bend the laws, change the laws, make the laws, just so they can make money. Well, also have power over us to make money. Let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Beyond the Label. F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, "The rich really are different from you and me." But in House of Gucci, director Ridley Scott challenges that and seems to say that while they may have more money, the rich still struggle with similar issues, especially family. Based on true events, this one tells the real-life drama of Maurizio Gucci, a scion of the family famous for their namesake brand of luxury goods, and his untimely death at the hands of his ex-wife Patrizia, who took a hit out on him after he left her for another woman. Since the case was highly publicized, we already know the who. Scott is looking at the why, at the slow turning, as it were. He accomplishes this, though at times the movie can feel soap opera-ish. The cast saves it from falling into camp, especially Lady Gaga, who plays Patrizia as a woman who really liked nice things, but nonetheless, at least initially, seemed to really love her husband, played by Adam Driver, and to be of help to him and his business. Scott skillfully navigates the class issue implicit in the story, the snobbery and disdain that the Guccis feel for Patrizia's nouveau riche background, leaving it to say all about the Gucci's social anxiety. The chemistry between Gaga and Driver's characters work, with solid support from Jeremy Irons, Al Pacino, and an over-the-top Jared Leto as the black sheep of the family, and who's responsible for some of the movie's funniest moments. Add the amazing wardrobe of 80s designer clothes straight from the Gucci archives, and House of Gucci is a fun look at how the 1% lives. Those of us who will never be in the perimeter of that world can take comfort in the adage, money can't buy happiness, but it does make for an interesting story. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Sarah Vitak. The question of how life came to be has captivated humans for millennia. The prevailing theory now is that on a highly volatile early Earth, lightning struck mineral-rich waters, and that the energy from lightning strikes turned those minerals into the building blocks of life, organic compounds like amino acids, leaving behind something we often refer to as the primordial soup. The wide acceptance of this theory is in large part due to the very famous Miller-Urey experiment. You surely encountered this in a science textbook at some point, but to refresh your memory, in 1952, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey simulated the conditions of early Earth by sealing water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen in a glass flask. Then, they applied electrical sparks to the mixture. Miraculously, amino acids came into existence amid the roiling mixture. It was a big deal. But recently, a team of researchers realized that, much like the first primordial soup, sitting in a bowl of earth, the lab experiments container played an underappreciated role. That perhaps it was also critical to the creation of organic building blocks inside their laboratory life soup. I talked to someone from the team.
I am Raffaele Saladino from University of Tuscia in Italy.
Then, much like today, when a researcher goes to start an experiment, often one of the first things they do is reach for their glassware. Well, today, actually, we use a lot of plastic as well.
But 20 years ago, in the lab, only glass contained it. Because in the mind of the researcher, glass is inert.
He said inert, meaning that it doesn't react with the chemicals you put inside it. But in reality, that is not necessarily always the case. Most of the time, glass is pretty inert. When you're baking with Pyrex, which is made of borosilicate glass, the same type of glass most labware is made out of, the cookware isn't going into your brownies. But when you're baking, whatever's in the pan is usually mostly water, so it'll come out to a pH of around 7 or so. But the pH of the Miller-Urey experiment was much higher. In the original experiments, they used a pH of 8.7, which is more alkaline or basic.
Why alkaline environment is an important topic? Since under alkaline condition, borosilicate then is not inert. It became a reagent.
In fact, this was actually noted by Miller in his original experiments, that the alkaline conditions caused the silica to dissolve. But it was largely overshadowed by the discovery of the synthesis of organic compounds. And as future researchers carried on, they missed that point in Miller's notes.
The attention was concentrated on modify the atmosphere, on modify the energy, the intensity, modify the analytical tools.
And the role of silica got forgotten entirely. Dr. Saladino's team wanted to see if the glass was doing anything in the reaction. To test this, they set up 3 different versions of the original experiment, where everything was the same except the containers. For comparison, they chose Teflon, which does not dissolve when holding an alkaline solution the way glass does.
There is the experiment only glass, the experiment only Teflon, and in the medium there is the experiment in Teflon with some pieces of glass added inside.
Then they used a technique called mass spectrometry to analyze what each reaction produced. Mass spectrometry is great for figuring out what kinds of molecules are in a complex mixture. They found that Teflon produced very few organic compounds. There were more compounds in the Teflon with glass pieces, but the glass container, by far, created the greatest number and largest variety of organic molecules. The mechanism of exactly how the silica helps catalyze the reaction is not clear yet, but it very clearly does. The obvious question then is, was there silica available in the early Earth environment?
The water is not suspended in the vacuum, no? The water is in geochemistry, is surrounded by minerals. Silica and borosilicate are the most abundant minerals surrounding the water.
The team has 2 next major objectives in mind. First, to try updating the experiment to model more closely the amount of silica that would have been available in the early Earth. And second, they want to try replacing silica with extraterrestrial minerals, like pieces of meteorite or rocks from other planets. Apart from just being very cool, that would give a more concrete idea of how to look for life in space. But here on Earth, coming one step closer to fully understanding why we exist is that much more satisfying. Even after nearly 70 years, a key discovery in our complex origin story still carries new revelations. As the authors say in the paper, the role of the rocks was hidden in the walls of the reactors. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Sarah Vitak.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. When the Magna Carta was agreed to by King John in 1215, it was sent to every county in England in order to inform everyone of its existence. Magna Carta means Great Charter, and it contained significant limits, at least in theory, on the power of the king. First, it set forth the principle that even a monarch is bound by certain laws. Second, the document itself was an agreement between King John and the barons. This can be seen as government by agreement or contract. The king had to negotiate with his nobles and reach a settlement agreeable to both parties. It's important to keep in mind, however, that the Magna Carta was an agreement between King John and the nobles and did not include the common people. However, clauses 39 and 40 of the Magna Carta are still part of English law today and were of special significance to the American colonists. All of the colonies adopted language from the Magna Carta as guarantees of fundamental rights. Clause 39. No free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, exiled, or ruined in any way, nor in any way proceeded against, except by the lawful judgment of his peers and the law of the land. Clause 40. To none will we sell, to none will we deny or delay right or justice. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day 18 supporters of the Socialist Workers' Party were sentenced in the first Smith Act trial. Earlier that summer, 29 militants had been targeted and arrested for their leadership of the events in Minneapolis during the 1930s. They led the 1934 Teamsters strike that made Minneapolis a union town, successfully confronted the fascist Silver Shirts in 1938, and led a WPA strike the following year. By 1941, federal agents were raiding SWP offices in Minneapolis and St. Paul, seizing boxes of documents, books, pamphlets, and other materials. The prosecution alleged the 29 had conspired to advocate the violent overthrow of the federal government. The defendants insisted that advocating class struggle to achieve a peaceful transition to socialism was not the equivalent of a violent overthrow. They added the trial was a government witch hunt bent on suppressing their First Amendment rights. 6 were released, another 5 were acquitted, but the remaining 18 were sentenced to between 12 and 16 months in jail. Dozens of CIO unions, including the UAW, the USWA, the URW, and the UE, all rallied to the defense of the convicted militants. The ACLU, central in the defense case, now mounted the appeals campaign. They failed to overturn the convictions, and the 18 surrendered to authorities 2 years later to begin serving their sentences. For historian Donna Haverty Stack, the case showed how far the Roosevelt administration went to prosecute political dissent, even to the point of targeting the labor-liberal left. The act would be repealed in 1952. And hundreds of convictions under the act would finally be reversed as unconstitutional by 1957.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only about 45. Cloudy skies throughout the day, winds light and variable, and cloudy skies this evening will become partly cloudy after midnight, lows around freezing, winds light and variable, and then some sun in the morning with increasing clouds during the afternoon, highs in the upper 30s, winds light and variable, and then it looks like on Friday we should have a little bit of warming, only in the low 40s during the day, and upper 30s at night, but it looks like we're going to start getting some precipitation that may turn to snow by Monday, Tuesday. We'll see how that goes. All right. So confirmed cases in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stands at 251,005 confirmed cases and 363 confirmed deceased. That number has not changed in one day. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 36 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.06 inches. Visibility is at 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 99%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 46 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 45 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 52 and cloudy. Kyiv is 31 degrees with fog. Kabul is 38 and clear. Hong Kong is 63 and fair. Tokyo is 48 degrees and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 61 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thailand Supreme Court upheld a guilty verdict today against construction tycoon Premeshe Karnasuda, who will serve more than 3 years in jail after losing his final appeal in a high-profile case centered on the poaching of protected animals. Premeshe, president of Thailand's largest construction company, was convicted in 2019 by a criminal court of offenses that included poaching in a wildlife sanctuary, poaching protected species, and possessing an unlicensed firearm. The Supreme Court reaffirmed a 2019 appeals court judgment that upheld a lower court's decision. Neither Premeshe, his lawyers, nor his company could immediately be reached for comment.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Sylvie Corbet and Nicholas Vaumontani of The Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A suspect in the 2018 killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was arrested yesterday, Tuesday, in France. According to a French judicial official, the official said the suspect was being held on the basis of a Turkish arrest warrant. He requested not being named in accordance with the French's justice system's customary practices. French radio RTL said the Saudi national Khalid Adey Al-Otabi was arrested at the Roissy airport near Paris as he was trying to board a flight to Riyadh. Al-Otabi was one of over a dozen Saudi officials sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury in 2018 over Khashoggi's killing. He was also mentioned in the declassified U.S. intelligence report that said Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had approved the operation that killed Khashoggi. The report used an alternate English transliteration of his last name. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.